Tennessee obviously picked up a big transfer the other day in Darlington Dubar, which seemed like Rick Barnes is just trying to repeat Dalton Connect with that guy. And there are now rumors. So I wanted to talk about bigs for a minute, though, because Jonas Adu is in the portal. But there are now rumors that Tobe Awaka may reverse course and come back to stay with Tennessee, that he may change his mind. And they're also targeting Igor Milicic Jr., that big man from Charlotte, who is a couple inches taller than Tobe Awaka. Which would you rather have if you're Tennessee basketball? A commitment from Milicic or Awaka returning?
That's a really good question. I'm leaning a little bit toward Milicic. I think that it's valuable to have a big man who can stretch the floor, who can shoot a three. I think that's important. I like Awaka. I think he's a very good rebounder. I think the reason he went in the portal was not NIL money. I think he went in the portal over playing time. Now, some of that was his own fault. Why? Because he kept getting in foul trouble. So there were some games where he played 12 minutes and had 4 or 5 fouls. That's on you. He's about 6'8". He's a physical player, very good rebounder. He started to progress offensively late in the year. He had some nice games on offense. But I would rather have the more versatile guy, the big guy. Here's the thing about Awaka too. He's physical enough to guard somebody like a Zach Edey or Andre Bacot, okay? But he's not tall enough. At 6'8", he's just not tall enough to deal with those guys. That puts him at a disadvantage. Now, why would he come back to Tennessee? Because Adu, surprisingly to me, is in the portal. So that would suggest that Awaka is going to get a whole lot more playing time, which is the reason I think he put his name in the portal in the first place. So now he sees a greater opportunity to play more. But, man, the guy that can step out, stretch, hit the three, I like that versatility. I think that's more of where basketball has gone. You don't see that many Zach Edey's or Bacots out there, right? You see more Hunter Dickinsons. So as much as I like Awaka, I would probably lean toward Milicic.
Here's what I'm going to say on it, and I want to know your thoughts because I actually agree with you with Milicic. I think if this were Rick Barnes' coaching style in like 2019, he'd probably rather have Awaka back. I think Rick Barnes has changed his style. He's willing to play a lot more small ball and go 4 guards, which I don't know many people his age that were willing to change his offensive philosophy the way he did this past year, but he did. I think when you're going to play so much more perimeter basketball, I think the one big you do have on the court has to be at a minimum of 6'10". You can't play 4 guards and then have your big be a 6'8" guy. And I think because of that, I'd rather have Milicic if I were him.
Yeah. Now, I would like to have both because I think they could complement. They could complement each other, I think, better than Adu and Awaka, because Adu could hit you a 12 or 15 footer. I actually thought he would end up with a better percentage of those mid-range shots than he did. But I think Milicic is a better shooter away from the basket. And so I think they would complement each other better than what we just saw this past year with Awaka and Adu.
Yeah, there's an intangible thing about it, and Jimmy, I'll just be honest. Because I'm from Memphis, I'm more of an NBA guy, so I'm a Grizzlies fan, long time Grizzly fan. But having watched that for a while, what I've learned about bigs is that, and this is what I think hit with Adu, was no matter how good they are, at least at the NBA level, when the Grizzlies and Clippers had a rivalry, Zach Randolph had a philosophy: if I punk and cheap shot Blake Griffin, he's going to back down and he's going to want no part of it, and I can take him out of his element. I feel like a lot of bigs do that in college basketball too. The intangible factor of how are you going to respond when someone throws a forearm at you? And it seemed like Jonas Adu was one that he wanted to be taken out of the game and didn't really want to deal with that. And that's an intangible you can't really quantify when you're going after bigs, is it?
No, it's not. And I thought specifically to what you're talking about, it looked like that Adu was intimidated by Zach Edey. It just looked that way. He appeared to be tentative. He had difficulty getting Edey off the blocks, and he was a non-factor in that game. And I thought intimidation was a part of that. And the one thing I remember talking with somebody about this, what does Adu need to work on if he returns? He needs to get in the weight room and get stronger and bigger. That's what he needs to work on because he's going to be asked at 6'11" to guard some physical inside players, and even to the this is not as well known of a player, but Tulu Smith at Mississippi State. Look what he did to Tennessee, and Adu had difficulty dealing with him. So that's what I thought he needed to work on. But yeah, in college, the physicality of a Zach Edey, the physicality of a Baycott, that can be tough for teams to match up with. And when they get physical and start throwing some elbows, there are some players that'll back down.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I gathered. And to Awaka's credit, he won't back down. He may foul out fast.
Right. That's right.
It'll fuel him.
Did you say might?
I'm sorry?
Did you say might foul out or will foul out?
Oh, may foul out. Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's very true. It's funny because I was debating, and I understand people were upset about the foul disparity in the Tennessee-Purdue game, but I'm sorry, Jimmy. I did think Tennessee fouled a lot more than Purdue did in that game.
I did too. Yeah, I did too. Edey had a lot to do with that, but I thought the same thing. And and I agree with Rick Barnes on this. It's difficult to officiate Zach Edey. I get that. I will say this part shouldn't be difficult. If he camps out in the lane for 6 seconds, you should be able to call 3 seconds in the lane. I was looking for that in some other games in which Edey played, in fact, the championship game. And I didn't think he camped out in the lane as much as he did against Tennessee. And then I was watching the women's game, and they actually called South Carolina for a 3 second. And I almost fainted when I saw him call a 3 second violation, because you just don't see that call in college basketball anymore. But Edey makes it difficult to guard inside. And but that's one reason he's a 2-time National Player of the Year. But you still have to have somebody that is physical enough, that can deal with that doesn't get in foul trouble right off the bat, that can try to neutralize a player like that. And Tennessee just didn't have an answer for him. But to your original thing, yeah, I thought Tennessee fouled more than Purdue, and that's one reason the Boilermakers went to the line more often.
So in 60 seconds, I want to ask Jimmy what he thinks is going to happen between Tennessee's personnel and basketball. Show is brought to you by Banks & Jones. We'll come back with this in 60 seconds.
Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com.
All right, Jimmy. So what's your prediction? Will Tennessee land? Are they more likely to return Tobe Awaka, get a commitment from Igor Milicic, or will they pick up neither?
I think they're going to get both.
You think
was that an option?
Both? That's an option. I did not think that. I didn't think that would be possible. But you think they're going to get both?
I think Awaka comes back, and I think he sees Milicic as playing a bit of a different position, because he can stretch out, and I guess he'd be a stretch 5 instead of a stretch 4, and then Awaka could be underneath the basket where he belongs. So I think Awaka will come back because he sees more playing time, and I don't think he sees Milicic as a guy that's going to take minutes away from him, because I think ultimately they could end up playing a different position. And so you don't have Josiah Jordan-James to be the stretch 4. So you need a power forward. And I think that Awaka would fill that role. And I think Milicic would be your center who could step outside and hit mid-range or 3-point shots.
That would open up so many possibilities for Rick Barnes next year in the offense he could run if they both came back. Because particularly I did a little bit of research on Darlin Stone-Dubar, and I mean, I think, am I crazy for thinking that's you don't want to bring up the guy who just had one of the greatest seasons of Tennessee basketball history, but he literally is like a clone of Dalton Knecht, isn't he?
Yeah, very much in terms of Knecht comes from Northern Colorado. He was a late bloomer, wasn't highly recruited out of high school. And now you got Dubar, now he started, I forgot, it was a bigger school where he started out before he went to Hofstra. But he played well. He averaged close to 18 points a game. He shot almost 40% from 3. A lot of those numbers are the same. Now, it's unrealistic to expect that he can produce like Knet did. I don't see that happening. Tennessee didn't know Knet was that good. Nobody knew he would be that good. But I do think he's a guy that can fill a role. Can he average 21 points a game? No. Can he get you 14, 15 points a game? I think the answer is yes. And I think that would be a tremendous boost to this team, which has to fill a lot of the offensive firepower that they lost.
Here's the one thing I will say about Connect, and I think sometimes somebody seems uniquely great, but I actually think Connect, and tell me if I'm crazy on this, is the start of a trend because of the NIL and transfer portal era in basketball, which is this. There are a lot of guys that we always think of one and dones like Calipari. Get a bunch of freshmen, roll the ball out. And, as you know, if you can track Rick Barnes' career at Texas, one and dones have never really worked out well under him because of Rick Barnes' principles and the system that he runs. He's trying to teach basketball and develop players, and they're just trying to make sure they can become first-round draft picks. One and done transfers, though, guys that have a lot of talent, are much more mature, and maybe just want to develop one aspect of their game before they go to the NBA or enter the draft, I think they are a much better fit for Rick Barnes. And I think you saw that with Dalton Connect, and I feel like you see that with Darlin Stone-Dubar. So I think this could become a trend where you see these scorers that they will, if they're 21 or 22, they're going to commit to Rick Barnes because they want to develop under Rick Barnes, and they're going to buy in immediately. So I think Dalton Connect may not be the first Dalton Connect you see at Tennessee.
Well, I agree with that. I would say, and I like the theory of it in that direction. Now, again, I don't think anybody's going to come in here and average 21 points and be the SEC Player of the Year, but I think they could be a very effective player. I think they could be perhaps even a consideration for like second team all SEC and have a fine one season at Tennessee. But man, what Connect did is it's so unbelievably good, and what a great story for Tennessee and for him. But to go in the direction you're talking about bringing in somebody, and this last year he comes from a smaller program, he develops, and then he enhances his ability as an NBA player. I think you're right about that. I think that's certainly an avenue that Tennessee will continue to pursue.